Hello, everybody. Welcome to the conversation of our generation. My name is Nick Jamel, and this is where we solve the problems of today with the wisdom of the past. Today, we will be talking about a book by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The it's called Notes from Underground is the book, and we're going to be talking about the road to hell and how I think this book really shows you what it's like when you are someone who is on that pathway. And I think this is an extreme example in this book, but the character in it, I think I felt pity for him the whole time. I think it was just painful to read in a lot of points. And there's also a lot of places where I hear him saying ideas that I have myself. And when, when I heard that, I'm like, oh, maybe he's not so bad. And then I think to myself, oh, maybe that's actually me not being, that's a problem for me if I am on the same page as this person. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the road to hell, and we're going to talk about the book itself and why you should read it, because I think it's a very valuable book. And as you can see, you know, you all probably read or spark noted Crime and Punishment in high school, but as you can see, this is not a very big book. It's very short. It's like 100 pages. So it's very reasonable as far as like length, and especially if you're not someone who's read a lot of Russian literature like me, it is a very readable book. It is a book that you can get through and not feel like you're just stranded. I know how it was for me reading like The Count of Monte Cristo, which is not Russian, but it has that dense, just long feel to it. Even though it's tremendous, Crime and Punishment felt the same way for me. Those two together just are tied together in my mind, that they just feel like they take forever. And I really enjoyed this book. I loved it, and I've read more Dostoevsky besides this, but this is one that I just think is really relevant. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, what that looks like. But before I do, I just want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast and or subscribe on YouTube if you're watching there, and to make sure that you get these book reviews each week. And if you're enjoying these things, definitely check out the email list. A great email went out this morning for everyone on there of what's going on in January, a quick newsletter. It's just a monthly newsletter with a few extra updates here and there, but I'll be publishing that so you can get a good look at what that's like. So definitely check out that post as well later on today, or around, depending on when you're listening to this. It's going out on the Friday that this is, so definitely check that out. And let me know what you think. I'm curious to hear what thoughts you have on the newsletter, on the book reviews that I've been doing. And if you have books that you're like, hey, Nick needs to read this if he hasn't already, let me know, because I'm always looking for great new reading ideas. So definitely let me know. But with that, let's hop into the quote of the week. And this one comes from Fyodor Dostoevsky, he says, "The greatest happiness is to know the source of unhappiness." I think that is incredibly insightful. And that's what this character lacks, is he doesn't understand the source of why he's so unhappy, and it's himself. You can see over and over again, when you read him, you're like, how are you just shooting yourself in the foot left and right? And it's so frustrating because you just want to smack him. Like, you want to be this man's friend and grab him by the collar and just smack him and say, what the hell are you doing the entire time you're reading this? Because he has so many opportunities to just not make an ass of himself, and every single time he does it, he manages to do it. Spoiler alert, every single time you're like, oh, I have a little hope, he's going to make an ass of himself. But that also makes it a great case study for learning what it is that is the source of unhappiness. You see how he thinks about the world, how he's imagining what his life could be like, and he's living in this fantasy in one hand of himself, of people around him, and then in reality he just undermines whatever fantasy he has for virtue and for courage and for all the good things that he sees bringing him, those kind of daydreams that you have of, beating up the bad guy and saving the princess kind of thing. Like those sorts of daydreams that you might have of virtue, of valor, that, oh, I would be the one who jumps on a grenade and saves my platoon or whatever it is. He has those thoughts, and then he just completely acts counter to those thoughts and just off the wall, opposite direction. And he doesn't see that all of what he's doing, all of what he's thinking leads him to unhappiness. And so what I see in this book is that Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which is why I started to say his name for the quote of the week, he says that the battle line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. And we know that quote very well, right? You see it all the time. But what he doesn't talk about is that heaven and hell, or where those are found, where that battle is fought. And, while that battle between good and evil is fought in your heart, the battle between heaven and hell is fought in every action that you take. Are you going to take the action towards heaven, take that step in the right direction, or are you going to step backwards? You don't, you it's not the cha-cha slide. You never slide to the side. You're always going forward or backwards with everything you do. And if you're not actively figuring out how to move forward, how to improve yourself, then what you're doing basically is slipping backwards. And I see that in this candidate or this character, sorry, so much, which is just he constantly is undermining his forward progress. Any steps he takes forward, he makes sure to take 2 steps back for that 1 step. And it's sad. It's just heart-wrenching to read this and just know where this is leading him. And I think that we are very good at downplaying our own faults. And I think what I recognize in myself after reading this is how much I set aside, oh yeah, I will do that someday. Oh yeah, I would be that guy in that situation. And then when you get to those times where it's, am I going to choose talking to my wife or looking at my phone on Twitter? Which one am I going to choose in that moment? And you just find yourself so often choosing the wrong thing out of habit. And if you can catch yourself before you get lost into 20 minutes of scrolling, that's good. You catch yourself, like, that's why I've been doing push-ups for how many times I pick up my phone so that I'm mindful of the fact that, oh yeah, I'm grabbing my phone. And it's like every time I do that, then that's kind of, I know I'm going to have a punishment for it tomorrow. Not a punishment, but I'm going to have to do something about that tomorrow. And it's made me try to work on detaching from that in a lot of ways. And I think that taking those kinds of steps, identifying those places where you're undermining your happiness, and find ways to create real lasting happiness in your life through your actions. That's what this book has really opened up my mind to, and trying to figure that out. And so that's one of the reasons why you should read this. The other is it's an amazing analysis of the human psyche in a lot of ways. I love how Dostoevsky can write a story that is 70% internal monologue and it still feels like a story. It still moves like a story because you're so in the mind of the character. And that's what pulls me into his work really well. And I need to go back because I did not appreciate this when I kind of half read Crime and Punishment in high school, because I was very bad about reading my reading assignments in high school. But I want to go back and read that because I need to see that interior struggle that Raskolnikov has in that book. But I really love the fact that in Notes from Underground, in The Gambler, Nasty Story, all of these books and stories that I've read from Dostoevsky, you just identify very well with the characters and you can get in the main character's mind. I, I think pretty much all of them, if I'm not mistaken, are first person, are from the first person point of view. I'm trying to think back now. I've read them, but I'm trying to think back if it's actually written in that person's point of view, and I think it is. But you just get into that psyche and that analysis of the situation, and as someone who is very good at just being in a room at a party and then thinking about, oh, that person, this person, and just analyzing what's going on, and not necessarily being the one who goes out there and just is like, hey, nice to meet you. It's very interesting to read kind of those other people who are a little bit neurotic like that. And it makes me feel better about myself because I think I'm a little bit better than the characters in this book and the compulsive gambler and the gambler. Um, Not always, but definitely in some ways. And so I think that just the effect that you can see that sinfulness and that disdain has on the heart, that's what the Notes from Underground shows you, the ability to just justify things and to make yourself the center, and why focusing on yourself and how you feel and how you think all the time is just so destructive. I I used to not understand why people are so anxious in our society, and I have just more and more come to believe that it's because we're so focused on ourselves. We're so focused on all the imperfections that we see within ourselves instead of just saying, "Hey, I'm going to go out into the world and to relate to other people." If you do that, when I find when I'm doing that, and I know from listening to other podcasts from like Matt Fradd's podcast and the Vital Masculinity podcast, you know, even Pints with Jack, they talk about this too, where going out from yourself, it makes it so much easier to turn away from your sins. If you struggle with pornography, with drinking, with all of those things that are, your sexual pleasure, your pleasure from drinking or eating or whatever it is, those things are goods properly ordered, but we use them as this kind of coping mechanism when we don't have real relationship. And that's why I think you should read Notes from Underground, because you see how someone can deteriorate, how someone can just be so vile because they shun relationship in their life. They shun real human interaction. And whenever they have it, they find a way to push it away. And they have a disdain for it. And so that's why you should read this book, so that you can learn why that's horrible and why you should avoid it. And it's just a fantastic book. It really is. So definitely check it out. Notes from Underground. There's links in the show notes for you to grab it. But definitely just grab it for yourself and check it out. It's a short, quick read, and I highly recommend it. If you're liking these book reviews, definitely subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found. You can find it there. I'm on anchor.fm/Khan of Our Gin. You can find me there, and anywhere that and then it has anywhere that they're listed, you can find it there. But definitely check that out. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter @Khan of Our Gin. And like I said, subscribe to the newsletter as well, so that you get the updates monthly and other updates as things happen in the community. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Conversation of Our Generation. Let's get the dialogue going. I'll talk to you next time.